From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. It was the fight to fight the by-election in Gorton and Denton that first put the race in the headlines.
Breaking news with Andy Burnham having been blocked from standing as a candidate for an upcoming parliamentary by-election by Labour's ruling body.
The Prime Minister is facing a backlash from some Labour MPs, angered by the decision.
Andy Burnham's doing a great job, but having an election for the Mayor of Manchester when it's not necessary would divert our resources away from the elections that we must have.
And now, with 3 weeks to go, this Manchester constituency is being thrust into the spotlight.
What do you want to know about the Gorton and Denton by-election? Everyone's been talking about it.
Gorton and Denton. Gorton and Denton.
Gorton and Denton.
Denton and Gorton.
Other way around, Gorton and Denton.
Doesn't it sound like a sort of double act from the 80s whose sketches are not allowed to be shown anymore? They cannot be repeated because of the accent. But,
So what do we know about this relatively new constituency? Who lives there, and what are the issues that will swing their vote? And with this looking like a close three-way fight, what would it mean for Keir Starmer if Labour lose? The story today, the Gorton and Denton by-election.
So there's a by-election in Gorton and Denton on the 26th of February because the Labour MP for the area, Andrew Goodwin, resigned recently on health grounds. I'm Daryl Morris. I am a presenter on Times Radio, and I'm also Northern. Andrew Goodwin was suspended from the Labour Party. He was embroiled in a scandal on the release of some WhatsApp messages where he and other MPs and other Labour Party members were quite rude about constituents, about other MPs. There were accusations of racism. There were accusations of being sort of cruel about disabled people. And there is a parliamentary investigation that is ongoing at the moment, but it's clearly affected Andrew Goodwin's health. He says, Goodwin said on X that he was very sorry for any offence caused by what he called badly misjudged comments. But he has resigned, and it's triggered a by-election.
I feel like we can't move on without mentioning that WhatsApp group that caused all of this trouble was called Trigger Me Timbers, which feels like it was always set up for disaster. Daryl, just give us a sense of where you've been. Just describe the constituency.
So I have been to perhaps the strangest constituency in British politics. It's going to be really hard for me to tell you a coherent story about this constituency. Rob Ford, who is an academic, he's a professor of political science at the University of Manchester, described it as a sort of Frankenstein's monster of a constituency because it was new in 2024 and it sort of borrowed from lots of other bits of constituencies. And so it's got, on the one hand, lots of wealth and gentrified areas, and in other bits, areas that you might best describe as left behind. Rob Ford has done some really great gathering on this as well. So he's kind of pulled some of the numbers together that I'm leaning on here. But it can be described, I think, on Best Understood as split between two councils. So the constituency overlaps a bit of Manchester Council and a bit of Tameside Council. And the demographics amongst these are very different. So there are 4 wards that come under the Manchester Council bit. And their demographics are roughly 42% white, 40% Muslim, 42% of the population either a university graduate or currently a university student. So this is ideal, fertile ground for Labour and the Greens. There are also 3 Tameside Council wards that are roughly 83% white, so big chunk of that population are white, 86% UK born, and about 30% of them are in a sort of blue-collar, working-class kind of job. So this is the sort of place that Reform would expect to do well. However, they are not equal in terms of population and electorate because the Manchester wards in 2024, the local elections then, had a registered electorate of about 55,000. The Tameside wards, 26,000. So the balance sits with the Manchester wards, that ward that was much more friendly for Labour and Greens in terms of demographic. This actually is a difficult seat for reform, but it also sort of explains how you have every demographic here. If the story of British politics is fragmentation, this is it in election form.
And Daryl, as you walk around this constituency with its very different parts, I mean, how do people who live there describe it?
So when I first arrived, as I pulled up on a street in Gorton, there was a large billboard on the side of a house, and it said, "Are you lost? I am the way, the truth and life. Visit hopebytheroadside.com." And that is an organisation that provide Bibles. It's a religious group who are seeking new followers. And as I got speaking to people, the lack of hope for the future, a lack of faith and trust in the system was perhaps one of the most dominant feelings that cut across every demographic. So I met a guy called Darren. Hi, Darren.
Hello.
Okay, go on. What are you thinking? Darren is going to vote for reform, but he feels they are the best of a bad bunch.
Nigel Farage is just as bent as the rest of him.
I think he would refute that allegation.
Well, in my opinion, is bent as the rest of him. They're all just there to feather their own nest.
He feels that sort of anti-politics sentiment really strongly, and he is deeply disillusioned by the whole system.
I don't watch any mainstream media type stuff anyway. I just don't like the way things are twisted just to suit an agenda.
He said to me, you are the mainstream media. I'm not sure if I trust you. I'm not sure what you're going to do with this. So when you say that you don't watch much media, mainstream media, you kind of mainly watch YouTube.
I watch like Maya Tusa, I like Tommy Robinson stuff, United Kingdom type stuff.
You're a Tommy Robinson kind of fan. You like him?
I do, yeah. I like the way he talks. I like some of the stuff he says.
He watches the likes of Tommy Robinson and sort of refuses to see Tommy Robinson as being far right. Interestingly, one thing that Darren pointed to was a couple of streets away, a place that he calls Millionaires Row.
Yeah, you've got to turn left here, under the bridge, and turn right. It's called 10 Yard Brow. It used to be a tannery and there's some cottages there. But if you turn right, there's like £750,000 houses down there, big houses.
What are the houses worth on this street here, do you think?
Oh, about 10 bob. I don't know. Not buy one, get one free or something. To be honest, I'm not allowed.
And he pointed to the fact that land prices are increasing, people are jumping in, and for him, just within a couple of streets, the disparity, the sort of gap between the people who live in this constituency was really visible.
The system is just what it is. Unless some people stand up and do something about it, I'm just living in my own little bubble and just get on with my own life and just try and do the best I can, to be honest with you.
Daryl, you mentioned that this is a relatively new constituency. It's been put together with different parts of others that have been joined up. Even so, give us a sense of the voting history of that area, of the constituencies that this constituency was made up of. What do we know about sort of some of its political history?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting stories that I do think help us understand it. So Manchester Gorton was previously represented by a familiar name, by William Benn, who was the father of Tony Benn, grandfather of Hilary Benn. He had a long stint as the MP. Also, from 1983, Gerald Kaufman was the MP. Now, he is the guy who famously referred to the 1983 Labour manifesto as the longest suicide note in history. We're going to talk about Andy Burnham, of course, shortly in this story. But this constituency has a history of people who have been something of a thorn in the side of the Labour leadership at various times, I think it's fair to say. There was also an interesting by-election in Manchester Gorton in 1967 when Winston Churchill stood for the Tories. Not that Winston Churchill, but his grandson. And actually that was a close by-election because the Tories came within 600 votes of taking it from Labour. That's the only serious challenge that Labour have had here. More recently, Labour won in 2024. And this is quite interesting because they won with 50.8% of the vote. Reform came second, but with 14.1% of the vote, so a very, very distant second. The Greens third with 13.2% of the vote. And then the Workers' Party of Great Britain, that party of George Galloway, won 10.3% of the vote. And even more interestingly, I think, if you bring together how the bits of this constituency that it now is would have voted in 2019, the result would have been 67.2% Labour win. Rock solid. And that's 2019, by the way, when Boris Johnson's Red Wall wave happened and he upended the political norms and Labour voters were drifting to the Tories in numbers. So that gives you a sense of just how rock solid a Labour area this should be.
Tell us a bit about the candidate they're fielding and why it's going to be such an interesting race.
So the Labour Party candidate is not Andy Burnham. And that is really the sort of dominant feeling on the ground. The Labour Party candidate is Angeliki Stoya.
I am absolutely thrilled and excited, and I want to thank everyone who came to the hustings. I am a proud Mancunian woman. I have walked the streets of this constituency.
She is a British-Greek Mancunian, she describes herself as. She is a Labour councillor in Whalley Range, which is just outside the constituency, but very sort of close by.
This is about Manchester. Manchester is a city united. We are rejecting division. I am so looking forward to going out of the doorstep and winning this for Labour.
I think if you understand the Labour Party as being a sort of broad spectrum from centre-left to sort of Jeremy Corbyn left, she's certainly closer to the centre-left. She's soft-left.
Darryl, when you're walking around talking to people about this by-election, how do they feel about Labour's chances? Obviously knowing that Andy Burnham was blocked, knowing that the reason of this by-election is happening is because the incumbent MP had to stand down amid scandal. Is there still a lot of loyalty for Labour there?
I think the story of Labour loyalty in Gorton and Denton is the story of Labour loyalty generally, in which you find very few people who say, I'm a Labour person, I've always been a Labour person, and I'm going to stick by them. Even in 2024, even in that election, the love for Labour was relatively shallow, and that explains a lot about our politics since, I think, why the government has struggled so much. And that's manifest here. I mean, look, you meet people like Del, who I spoke to.
Afternoon, my name's Del, a local resident in the Gorton area.
He's a Labour man, always voted Labour, wasn't happy with Andy Burnham being blocked.
I think it's a bit naughty, really. With that said, we should give Labour a bit of a chance, a bit more time. However, I think they've not addressed certain topics. They haven't been very vocal about Israel, and we're not going to get into that one because I know how sideways that can go.
For him, he wasn't happy with the way that Labour handled the situation in the Middle East. Now, that's an issue that they are alert to here. The Greens leader, Zach Polanski, has been very clear about that.
Polling shows time and time again people are deeply unhappy, to understate it, about our government's role with the Israeli government. And so when I'm in Gorton and Denton, I'm absolutely going to be talking about the same things we've just spoken about.
The Labour Party have lost big chunks of the Muslim vote because of the situation in the Middle East. We saw that writ large in Rochdale, didn't we? Del, it was interesting because he is flirting with the idea of voting Green.
I might give the Greens a look in.
Why is that?
Because they've never had an opportunity to demonstrate what they could potentially do.
I would also describe Del as being anti-reform. I think more than pro-Green, more than pro-Labour, he wanted to do whatever it was necessary to keep reform out from that seat.
And reform, well, we'll leave reform there as a man of colour. Reform are not for people of colour, are not for people from elsewhere.
And so he said he will most likely therefore vote for Labour. When I told him that the Green Party are also setting themselves up as being the alternative to reform and the most likely to keep them out, he said, well, that's given him a real difficult decision to make. So the Green Party might say, this is actually a fight between Reform and the Green Party, and a vote for Labour risks letting Reform in.
Just throw me sideways there. I just hope that the right party is in power, whether that be Labour or the Greens. Definitely not Reform, and definitely not the Tories. Not after the, 12 or 13 years of austerity. They just ran the country down.
And this comes also at a time where Labour is again sort of embroiled in scandal of sorts because of Peter Mandelson.
Peter Mandelson was practically born into the Labour Party. His grandfather was a Labour cabinet minister, and he's been an important figure there for decades. He helped make Tony Blair electable, served in the cabinet 3 times, and more recently, Keir Starmer appointed him to be ambassador to the United States. Now he's resigned his party membership, saying he doesn't wish to cause further embarrassment over his continued links to the disgraced paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Was that a subject that was coming up much when you're talking to people?
Not specifically, nor did the scandal around Andrew Gwynn really come up either. To be honest, I think it's already sort of baked into the way people think this, because the dominant theme of the last couple of years since the pandemic really has been this distrust, this sense of disillusionment, this feeling that politicians are sort of all in it for themselves. And I think that these are stories that just reinforce how people already feel, rather than being a deciding factor in changing their vote now.
Daryl, you've been telling us about the constituency of Gorton and Denton and the battle for what was quite a loyal Labour seat and which way it might go. Reform are one of the big stories of this constituency. It is turning into a 3-way battle as far as we can tell. Tell us about the Reform candidate.
So Matt Goodwin is the Reform candidate, and he is a very interesting character.
This by-election is actually a referendum. It's a referendum on Keir Starmer. It's a chance for the hard-working, law-abiding, tax-paying people from this seat to have their say on Keir Starmer and to make political history.
He is a former academic who's been on, let's say, a political journey. So he was a researcher of right-wing populism. He wrote several acclaimed books on it. He was a sort of staunch defender of liberal social democracy. And now he's joined the movement that he once researched. I spoke to a Labour person recently who said that they used to love Matt Goodwin. They actually went to watch him speak. They bought tickets to a speech that he was giving, and how shocked they were by what they described as his own radicalisation. They described him as sort of being radicalised by researching radicalisation, if that makes sense. There is a famous clip of him debating against Tommy Robinson.
Can someone define far right to me, please?
Well, Matt's one of the experts on that very thing.
Right, yeah.
There are 2 key things that far-right groups share.
And Matt Goodwin is explaining to Tommy Robinson why he felt that he was a threat to democracy and how the sort of right wing of British politics works.
Firstly, they reject or they undermine what representative liberal democracy is all about. Now, a liberal representative democracy accepts that a plurality of views is legitimate. What they also share, ultimately, is a rejection of human equality. And I would guess that many people who are watching the show would feel that your organisation is no longer talking about militant Islam. Okay. You're just talking about Muslims.
And last week, Tommy Robinson endorsed him in this by-election. So that's a bit of a sense of the journey that Matt Goodwin has been on.
Wow. I mean, that really is a complete about-turn.
It really is. I think Matt Goodwin is also interesting in a couple of senses, because he's really benefited from the information ecosystem, which sort of rewards populist politics of any colour, right, left or right. Big pronouncements, simple answers for sort of who's to blame and how to fix it. And Matt Goodwin, in sort of being part of that content ecosystem, has said some controversial things. He's argued that Rishi Sunak, for example, while British, doesn't fit his definition of English because of Rishi Sunak's heritage.
My view is Englishness is an ethnicity that is deeply rooted in a people that can trace their roots back over generations. It is a very distinctive identity and a different identity from Britishness. So I think that's probably a difference I have from, say, liberal progressives who say, well, anybody can be English as long as they sign a piece of paper.
That's obviously been very controversial. And so there is a feeling here that he could also put people off, right? That for all of the sort of benefits of having somebody who, you know, is an academic and has strong name recognition and a strong online brand and all that sort of stuff, just remember how tight the numbers are here for Reform, right? They have to win in all the places they would expect to win, and they have to make ground in the places that you wouldn't expect them to make ground. And I suppose there's a bit of a risk for them here, that if they have a candidate who puts off enough people in the places where they need to make ground, then that could be enough to swing it.
And Darryl, as you mentioned, they did come second at the last election, but it was a very distant second. How serious a threat are reform in this constituency?
A very distant second they came, and it's also worth us kind of considering that reform have very little footprint here, actually. It is a very solid, staunch Labour area. And so when we consider how fragile these Labour areas are to the march of reform, where, again, reminder, they need to win in those kind of white working class places that they would expect to win, as well as making roads in some of those student areas, gentrified areas, maybe even a Muslim area. This is going to be a really, really insightful indicator of where reform actually are. And at the moment, I would say they are a genuine threat.
Darryl, tell us about the Greens. As you pointed out, they came third at the last election, and yet everybody's talking about them as a serious contender in this by-election. Who is their candidate?
So the Green candidate is a woman called Hannah Spencer, and she is also, much like Matt Goodwin, a very strong performer online.
So hello, my name is Hannah Spencer. I didn't grow up planning on being a politician. I didn't go to university to study politics. I'm a plumber here in Manchester. I fix homes for a living.
I spoke to somebody in Levenshulme, probably perhaps the most sort of gentrified bit, who said that they had seen almost twice as much from the Greens, online and off, as they had from Labour.
Keir Starmer was too scared to let their members choose the candidate that they wanted. Nigel Farage has parachuted in a GB News presenter, but the Greens chose me.
And I think that helps us understand how the Green Party's content is really cutting through to people. Look, they've set themselves up here as being the alternative to reform.
I am soon to be reform's worst nightmare. And I can't wait to get back to the pavements and to carry on meeting amazing people. We will stick together and we will crack on, because this is Manchester and we do things differently here. Thank you.
You know, if we understand this by-election as being what will probably be the politics of the next couple of years, which is insurgent reform, referendum on Nigel Farage, referendum on reforms politics, you know, right versus left tussle, the Labour Party want you to believe that that is a fight between Labour and reform. The Green Party want you to believe that that is a fight between the Green Party and reform.
Yeah.
And we'll find out on the 26th of February what the actual poll is. But it will be a very, very strong indicator as to who is right.
Is there a sense when you're walking around, are people who have in the past voted Labour, are they talking about voting Green?
You know, when we talk a lot about this sort of system being broken and the world's not quite working for people and people are feeling disillusioned and disenfranchised, the Labour Party nationally, the Labour Party leadership, Keir Starmer, those around him, are going to be sat there thinking, gosh, we've had barely 2 years in office. You know, we're trying here to fix this system. We are the insurgent party. We've been out of power for such a long time. And yet, what you also have to understand about places like this in the north of England is that the Labour Party is the establishment here. This constituency has had a Labour MP since the dawn of time. Manchester Council is as strong and staunch a Labour council as you are ever going to get. The Mayor of Greater Manchester is a hugely famous Labour figure. People around here do not see Labour as being the party to fix the problem. They see Labour as being the architects of it, which is a big opportunity for the Green Party to come along and say, look, hey, we're the real alternative.
Darryl, when we've talked about the Burnham saga and how Keir Starmer managed it, a lot of our Westminster watchers have said it would be catastrophic for him if Reform win this by-election, but even worse for him if Green do.
Yes, Keir Starmer wants the story of British politics in the next few years and in the run-up to the next election to be a fight between him and Reform. I think he sees that as the best way of building a coalition around the Labour Party and specifically a coalition around him. Somebody who's very different to Nigel Farage, who's a sort of antithesis of Nigel Farage in lots of ways. However, the result of this by-election could upend all of that. Because if the Green Party do win, that story, that narrative is shattered. right? Because Zach Polanski comes along and says, hey, look, in a very staunch Labour area, where the big story of the by-election was reform versus not reform, we won. The coalition of anti-reform sentiment built and coalesced around us. And that is a major headache for the narrative, the story that Keir Starmer wants to set over the next couple of years.
And Daryl, everybody is calling this a three-horse race, but obviously there are a long list of candidates who are running. Just tell us a little bit about the person standing for the Conservatives.
Yeah, so the Conservative Party candidate is a woman called Charlotte Cadden. She was a police officer for 30 years. She's kind of been in and around the area. She's put in local schools and the NHS and policing at the heart of her campaign. Look, I think this is a real uphill battle for the Conservative Party. They came a distant, what was it, 4th or 5th in 2024, and they got 7% of the vote. If we talk about a sort of Kemi Badenoch comeback, if we talk about the Conservative Party sort of reigniting some support and sort of finding their feet again post-election, that doesn't happen in Gorton and Denton.
And Daryl, Ofcom rules being what they are, I feel like we should also just very quickly run through the other candidates on the list. Who are they?
Yeah, so the other candidates in this by-election are Nick Buckley, who is running for Advance UK. Dan Clark is running for the Libertarian Party. Sebastian Moore for the Social Democratic Party, Joseph Omiche for Rejoin EU, Jackie Piercy for the Liberal Democrats, Hugo Wills for the Communist Party, and Sir Oinkalot for the Monster Raving Loony Party.
It wouldn't be a British by-election without them. Daryl, you've spent some time there. You've spoken to people on the ground. What are your predictions? Which way do you think it'll go?
Look, I've covered other by-elections. I came away from those by-elections knowing in my gut which way it was going to go. Truth is here, I think that any number of 2, maybe 3 outcomes could happen. And truly, I just don't know. I honestly think that we could wake up on that Friday morning and any one of Labour, Reform and the Greens could have won.
And one of the reasons that this by-election is getting so much attention is Andy Burnham and the fact that he's not running in it. If it isn't Labour that wins, how bad will that be for Keir Starmer?
Really bad, I think. I think really, really bad. He will be directly blamed because the story will be Andy Burnham would have won, and I think Andy Burnham probably would have won. It puts a rocket booster under Zach Polanski and the Greens as being the real alternative to reform. I also think, by the way, there's a little bit of risk here for Nigel Farage too, right? Because we've seen Reform slip a little bit. Their sort of march in the polls has stalled in some cases, has slid back in others. And if they don't win here, that also sort of ruins his story too, because he wants you to believe that he is building for Reform UK an electoral coalition big enough to win in places like this, that he's going to make inroads in areas that you wouldn't expect them to do so well. And quite frankly, he also needs to do that as well. And if he doesn't in this election, that will also raise some questions about whether or not we have seen peak reform. I think the consequences for everybody here, the stakes for everybody, are really, really, really high. This by-election is the story of British politics at the moment. And like I say, really honestly, I think anything could happen.
That was Daryl Morris, who regularly presents on Times Radio. You can find all the latest on this by-election and on Number 10's Mandelson problem online at thetimes.com. And don't forget to listen to The State of It, our podcast with all the latest from the heart of Westminster. The producer today was Olivia Case. The executive producer was Tim Walklate, and sound design and theme composition were by Mal Assetto. If you'd like to get in touch with us about this or any other podcast, do drop us a line to thestory@thetimes.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.